Good morning. Denise Dryden here. I'm out on Bainbridge Island, middle of July, doing my weekly broadcast on Facebook Live. So today I want to talk about something interesting. Over the last week I've spent, 3 different meetings with young mothers with 10-year-olds and under, and talking about what their issues are and what's going on for them and what their challenges are, right? And so I came up with some ideas that I wanted to share with you today and see how it works. So the topic for today is called shutting down the systems. Systems, you can figure that out. A system is a set of things that work together as parts of a mechanism, right? So, there are different parts and they move in all together in tandem. They're an interconnected network. They're a set of principles and procedures to which something is done. They're an organized scheme or method. So, that's when I go to the dictionary to make sure that we have a working definition of what a system is. So you can tell that there are many places to look for where systems exist, whether it's at work and how we set goals and deadlines and sort of look for our individual accomplishments. It's within our family roles and the responsibilities and, which parent plays what role, which grandparent, sort of the lineage. In education, what the K-12 system looks like. How we learn, how we do a task from beginning, middle to end. It's like where our executive functioning steps in. And, how we look at mechanisms like engines, technology, communication, anything we can sort of draw a lit chart, a flow chart, and say, how does it work from beginning, middle to end? So our systems are based on experiences and repetitive successes. There are also new theories put into practice, and they're very calculated, and we can measure them and we can watch them flow. They're designed to work for us, right? We hope. And they're designed to work with us and to establish order. They're dependable. They're growth-oriented. They're skill-building. And that's where we can see leadership and we can see financial predictability in our systems. If we do this, then that. And so we chart things out. And when this is what happens when we sort of lay things out and we maintain them and we keep them going. Each generation has approached the way we do systems really differently. That's what I've been learning in my coaching. Because I started initially with baby boomers as parents, and now I've been shifting into Gen Xers and looking at millennials and next gens, and I thought I would share some of this with you. So 1945 to 1964 is the baby boom generation. They develop systems, they maintain systems, they hunker down, they endure systems. They create associations to support systems. They dig in and they make them work. They suffer. They go for the gold watch, especially the earlier ones, the 1945 to 1955. This was all about their retirement and staying with something through the end, having some viable work. Those born 1955 to 1965 were much more fluid, less dedicated to retirement group. 1965 to 1985 is the Generation Xers. So they're the creators, the shifters. They're the highly educated analyzers. They look at that and they go, so why are we doing it this way? And so they work with existing systems and they shift them. They move them around, or they step away from them and they go start a competitive system that's better, faster, smoother. They're the technological developers. They love systems. They love visual coding. They love software. They love apps. They like watching how things move from one point to the other. I like that about them. 1985 to 2005 is the millennials. Millennials are not systems people. They're non-attachers, right? They're highly educated, but they're discontented with all these systems. They don't like the rigidity. They're kinesthetic. They're feelers. They work on a vibrational level, and if you try to force them, kind of like think of a round peg into a square hole, they're like, I'm not going to do that. Whether it's working part-time after high school or in high school after in college, whether it's getting a career out of college, they will leave. They'll walk away. they will not continue or stay if it's not tolerable. They're creative, and they put their creativity into their livelihood. So they're adapters. So they're non-attachers, leavers, and adapters. So when systems don't work any longer, we have to see how each of these generations approaches these old, archaic systems. And they look for, like, hey, this is the way we used to do it. It worked really well for us then, but it doesn't work now. So, I was thinking, what's the best example I could think of that? And I've lived in Whitefish, Montana, off the grid, not off the grid, but sort of rural. And then I moved over here to Bainbridge Island. And in both situations, I was working with CenturyTel on a telephone Wi-Fi system, which is super slow. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is an old system that hasn't adapted well into the new progressive needs for streaming, for Wi-Fi. And so that's sort of a really good idea of what happens when a system no longer works. So when they don't work, we have some options. We can remodel them, and we can dress them up on the outside and make them look pretty with some new terms and some new packaging. Or we could redesign them, sort of go in and completely gut them and start over and change them and keep what works and redesign the rest. Or we can demolish it, right? Just plow it down and go, any idea how we want to do this in the future? We're not really willing to do that right now, but I think that's coming. Or, we walk away from it and we go create our own. I'm not going to deal with that. That's just too old. I'm going to go do something newer, fresher, that works. So our 30-year-old and unders, they have this magnificent blend to all these ways of working with systems. They'll take an old building that was, in a neighborhood, and they will remodel it and turn it into a cool coffee shop or a co-working space or a bistro. They will take old destroyed neighborhoods and get friends to move in and start businesses. They sort of revitalize areas with new energy and new services. They'll create family systems that are blended and open and non-traditional. They'll live together in small pods. They blend gender. They blend race. They blend age. They blend skills. Nothing, it's like there's no separation in our under 30-year-olds. And they will focus on what they want, and they will change everything along their path, because if it doesn't feel good for them, they can't do that. Now, some of us in the older generations can identify with this. I mean, I might be a baby boomer, but in my heart and soul, I love the millennial energy because it has a much greater freedom. And anyone who knows me knows that I'll walk away from anything that doesn't feel good. So it's important to understand, because as we prepare for the 20 and unders, because we talked about the 30 and unders, but let's go to the 20 and unders, and these new babies born each year. Wow, if this is what the millennials are doing, what's going to happen as they're coming down the pike? So when I'm meeting with these moms with 10-year-olds, I notice some things, that they're not attached to any systems, especially old institutions that don't work anymore. The 30 and unders and the 18-year-olds, they're looking at the political system and they're going, oh, hell no. That two-party thing never worked for me. I've never seen it work. It doesn't work now. They refuse to participate in a 12-year industrial education system. They don't understand the traditional roles of mother and father. So when you put your hands on your hips and you go, because I'm not your mother and I told you so, I'm telling you to do this, they look at you like, so? Just because you birthed me doesn't mean you get to tell me what to do. And in the 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s, that would have been a completely different reaction. Now you're like, oh, I guess I have to earn the right to tell you that I know what to do. Or if we have a boundary, this is why the boundary is in place and this is what it's about. Religious expectations, conflicts, that's not something that's going to be attractive to a 20 and under. And the healthcare system, vaccinations, checkups, cancer treatment, hospitals, they're really looking at alternative ways to taking care of their body, or not taking care of their body because they don't care, right? This is all really interesting formatting here. So when we have these old honored systems that no longer work, it creates sort of this conflict and division between the old and the new, right? So the olders are going, they're just so disrespectful, and the new generation is going, they're just so disrespectful. So I've worked in therapeutic care with out-of-home interventions and with young adults and teens for the last 25 years. So I've watched these generations sort of bring up their parents and then come into conflict. And they've ended up in wilderness programs, RTC, boarding schools. And they're the forerunners of the resistance of this imposed older systems. So these young ones, these new generations, they're not interested in hunkering down and suffering and trying to just like endure. They are adapters, and they're leavers. They'll leave, they'll shut it down, and they will refuse. So we have to deal with what happens when our systems are shut down from non-participation. So this is really interesting. It's strong, it's masterful, it's insightful, it's intuitive to refuse. To just say, yeah, whatever you're doing over there, I'm not doing that. When you deal with that in a 15-year-old, you're thinking, I have no tools for this. I don't even know how to approach this concept. They refuse a parent who's not in alignment with them. They refuse school if it's not in alignment with them. They refuse to work if it's not in alignment with them. And they refuse relationships if they're not in alignment with them. The flip side is when something's in alignment, you see a very happy, turned on, tuned in kid, young adult. They love what they do. So I've seen tremendous warriors, coming out and sort of sitting down and saying, I'm not going to school anymore. That whole thing that's going on in there doesn't work for me. And I sort of liken it, and I've been on a couple of presentations, the Shift Network, and I'm doing the Sensitive Summit, and I do a couple of podcasts. And so what I keep doing is taking the Gandhi information of nonviolence that Martin Luther King used in the 60s and saying, now we have an entire generation of kids that use this proficiently. I'm just going to sit down. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to do what you need me to do because this doesn't work for me. So it's up to us as the elders, as the parents and the bosses and the leaders to understand that these kids, this new generation, they're frequency holders. So if the frequency and the system are out of whack, they're not going to participate. They're going to go for what kinds of living and what kinds of ways they can adapt and reform and change. And so it's up to us to adapt and reform and change and relent and release what we thought was good, what used to work for us, what we used to be in, what was imposed on us from our parents and what we impose on our children. And we have to look for ways to transform. Because when we get in the arena of stuck energy, it's just a power struggle. And what I've learned is that most parents of 30 and unders are ill prepared for the level of power struggle it's going to take to shift a stuck energy. It requires an enormous amount of transforming on our behalf and on the relationship behalf. So how do we do this? So we get comfortable with being outside our comfort zone, really comfortable with being uncomfortable. We explore where we're rigid and why. How did I adopt this belief? Why do I think that when I say I'm the mother, that matters? Where did that come from? Whose voice am I really channeling? I can tell you. I know whose voice that is. Take behaviors and see them as energy. When I was working with these moms and we were talking about 2 and 3 and 5-year-old tantruming and what do you do when you're in the airport and they're just in overwhelm, you realize that this is energy. It's not a behavior, and you have to sort of look at it and then redirect it. Find a way to redirect it. Don't squelch it. Don't shut it down. Redirect it. Learn how to work with energy. Open up and use your wisdom to guide, assist, and respond. Because what we do with energy is we respond to things. We don't go, nope, not it, and shut it down, because it never stops. We just move it around us, over there, away from us, everything. So I want to leave you with this concept that anger, anxiety, stress, and pressure are all forms of what life looks like when we're shut down, when our systems are shut down. Think about that. Anger, anxiety, stress, and pressure is when things are shut, when the hose is pinched, when there's nothing really working. So collaboration, joy, flow, expansion, these are all based on an open system. So we have to learn how to be an open, adaptive system, especially as we're stepping into the elder, the parent, the grandparent, the aunt, the uncle, the teacher, the leader. How am I going to help all of us understand this? So when we know that we can either go to constricted or we can go to flow, we get to choose. That's the beauty of life right now. It's all up to you. So this is the kind of stuff I talk about every week. You can find me on my website at DeniseDrydenCoaching.com. There's all the videos. They're also on YouTube. And have a wonderful Sunday, and take a look at where you're stuck and where you're open. Have fun. Bye-bye.